Hello everyone. This video is going to talk about integrating sources. This is going to be a two-part series with these videos. The first one is going to focus on integrating sources using Paraphrase, and the other one is going to focus on integrating sources using direct quotation. Now, there is a third option, which is called summary. However, the summary video is already provided for you when we were addressing the They Say, I Say blogs. So first, let's go ahead and talk about why we integrate sources. So the first thing is when you're talking about a source or integrating a source, that means that you are going to be using somebody else's words and integrating them or incorporating them with your own writing for one reason or another. Now, as far as the reasons are concerned, please look at the other video regarding how and why we use sourced references. So that would be including the beam model. Okay, so review that and that will help with that regard. So what this video is going to focus on is more of the strategies of how to integrate them with your actual writing itself. Okay, so as I indicated before, there are going to be three primary ways that we do that, which is through summary, paraphrase, or direct quotation. Now, each one of these has its own way of actually putting them or integrating them in your own writing. So that's what we're going to focus on here. As I said before, the summary already has its own video. So we're going to look at the paraphrase. Now, for many of these anyway, we have what's called, sort of like a three-tier approach. So many different models or resources talk about it differently. Of course, you could say it's the sandwich method or the burger method or whatever the case is. But ultimately, it's three things that you have to consider when you are going to integrate a source, okay? So the first one is what's called a signal phrase. That means you are going to signal to your reader that you are about to introduce information that is not yours, okay? Now, the reason for integrating it is going to come through the kinds of words you use in your signal phrase as well as what comes after, okay? So you have also the meat, what's actually the source, that is the summary, the direct quotation or paraphrase. That means that is the other people's words or work. And then finally, you're going to end that by using commentary, analysis, explanation. These are your words, okay? So what you are saying about what you took from someone else, okay? And you can see why that's important, because if you just throw in a quote or a paraphrase and you don't include the commentary or analysis or explanation for it, then you are confusing the reader. So you're leaving it up to the reader to decide to do that, and that could mislead the reader. It could provide miscommunication, misinterpretation, okay? So think of it as this: you wouldn't walk up to a friend, quote something, and walk away, right? Your friend would probably say, why did you say that? Why is that important? What's going on? So the same thing happens with your own writing. You're not just going to throw information in there. You'll need to integrate it appropriately, and that includes talking about why it's in there, okay? So as far as the signal phrase is concerned, so the signal phrase shifts from your writing to the idea of the author. That's important. As I said, if you didn't have a signal phrase, for example, and you just started writing, someone else's words, we wouldn't know whose words were whose, right? So we wouldn't know if it was yours. We wouldn't know if it's the other authors that you're including their information. And of course, then we start dealing with issues of plagiarism when that happens. And a lot of times students will have unintentional plagiarism because they don't include the signal phrase. The other thing about a signal phrase is, what is it made out of, right? And so a lot of times we could just put the author's last name. We could put one of those verbs. Again, see the key verbs that are provided in the Canvas core shell, the list of strong verbs, of course. And this verb lets the reader know how you understood the author's text. So for example, if I said, Nancy or Nayeli Villanueva said, right? And then you're going to include something that I said. Well, the word said is a verb, but it's just not really indicating why I said it, right? So if I said Nayeli Villanueva argued, then I know that I understood the information that I'm about to put as an argument, or if I illustrated something, or if I highlighted something. So the kind of verb you use is going to matter in when you introduce the information. Then also, of course, the why, right? So go back to the beam model and think about, is it just background information? Is it exhibits, an argument? So that's also going to help you in selecting the key verb that you're going to use in your writing as well. So a couple of examples here in looking at signal phrases. So this is for quote, paraphrase, and summary. So you might have something like the CEO of Lighthouse Consulting predicts, okay? So here we know that the CEO is just merely predicting. They're not necessarily saying it's an argument. They're not saying that it's for sure or anything like that, that this just is merely a prediction. And then we have our direct quotation that lets us know it's their words. A year of exciting, challenging endeavors that will expand the company's horizon and stimulate growth throughout the company. For paraphrase, and that's what we're going to focus on in this video, we are going to see that there are no direct quotations. That means you're paraphrasing it in a way that's going to be clear and matches your writing. But we also have the signal phrase, right? According to a recent survey from Pew Research Center, more than 50% of adults in the U.S. play video games, with 21% engaging in this activity on a daily basis. Now, imagine if you didn't put the signal phrase according to a recent survey from Pew Research and you just said more than 50% of adults. If you just said more than 50% of adults, I wouldn't know where that information comes from. I wouldn't know if that was just common knowledge you had. I wouldn't know why you're including that. But by including that it is a survey and that including where it's from, these are two key information that I need, right? That if it's a survey, I know as a reader that surveys are not 100%, right? This is not necessarily fact either. It's just to survey, which surveys can be risky sometimes. But if I just said more than 50% of adults, that might just be you trying to pass off factual information when it's not. It's simply a survey that somebody took, okay? And then finally, the summary, the nutritionist and Robinson proposed that an iron-fortified soy sauce is the solution to the anemia problem in the young women of rural China. So this is a summary from a report that they include. And again, it doesn't really have any kind of argument or anything like that. It's just summarizing the information. But again, we know where it's coming from, okay? So let's go ahead and look at paraphrasing here, okay? So with paraphrasing, it's important to note a couple of things, right? So the first thing is when you paraphrase something, that means you're stating an idea in your own words, okay? So even though it's somebody else's ideas and information or whatever, you are going to be communicating it in your own words in your writing. And a lot of times when people do that, it's for a specific reason, okay? And those reasons include, first, maybe you want to clarify a short passage from a text. Clarification is a reason, meaning that you are going to just assist your reader in taking something that might be complex and clarifying it in a way that they would understand. So that might be one way you paraphrase, or one reason you paraphrase. Another would be that you want to avoid overusing quotations. That could just be a style thing. If you have way too many quotations, that's not usually a good look, because that means you're relying on others' words and not really demonstrating that you understand the information that you're incorporating in your writing. The other is if you want to explain a point when exact wording isn't important. So sometimes other authors, when they're writing or conveying important ideas, it can be really complex, right? Or very wordy or not written well. And so what you want to do is paraphrase it so that way it makes sense to your reader. That's way it's not wasting the reader's time with filler information. And again, you want to really capture the point of that without losing or getting what we say lost in translation. Okay, and then the other is, of course, if you want to report numerical data or statistics. So in other words, if you're explaining certain data that might be complex as well, okay? So let's go ahead and look at paraphrasing a little bit more in depth. So let's say that we were going to use this passage here, okay? And this is the passage that you all have, for example. And we know after reading this, so you'll want to pause to read, or with the assignment that you have that you're working on, obviously, you can see that it's complicated, right? It's saying these results suggest. So right away, by just this phrase alone, I know that I'm going to have to paraphrase some results to either a study or something like that. You can see that the language that's being used is a little bit more complex. Some of it is a little bit wordy and so forth. So you really need to break down the key parts, okay? What are the key points that are being presented here? So we have these results suggest that morning people or early chronotypes, okay? So we have a choice. We have early chronotypes, which is specific terminology, or we could just say morning people. Now, chances are if you're paraphrasing, you're probably going to use the phrase morning people or some version of that because it helps to communicate more clearly to your readers, right? As measured on the morningness, eveningness continuum, so something that's being measured from morning to night, right? Or on the scale of morning to night, are more proactive than our evening types. So a morning person is more proactive than a person who is, stays up or, stays up late. And then you have additionally, so more information to report, the misalignment of social and biological time. Okay, so what does it mean to social and biological? Biological means our standard biological clocks, our bodies, when we're supposed to go to sleep, when we're supposed to be awake, and the fact that our social life sometimes interrupt that, right? So they say the misalignment between social and biological time, as assessed by the difference between rise times on weekdays and on free days, correlated with proactivity, suggesting. And so here, so what does this all mean? Well, the word suggesting is going to tell you that people with a high misalignment of social and biological time may be less able to act in a proactive manner. So people whose social time and biological time are misaligned or are not connected are less likely to be proactive, basically. Okay. And why? Because, and you have the keyword because here, of sleep delay. Their biological schedules seem not to fit neatly into social demands, school, university, work schedules, as do those less misaligned. So basically, people's natural biological clocks don't work well with standard social stuff that we have to do. So that's basically what this is suggesting, right? So if you're going to paraphrase, you're not going to put all of this in there. We know as we went through this, it was not necessary. So if we look up here, these are the different ways we can do this. We can say, and here's the signal phrase, Randler states that people who are naturally morning people often also display traits that are considered proactive. He also suggests that later risers may not show as many proactive traits because they naturally operate on different sleep schedule. That's one way to do it. And of course, we have the page number here. Or you can say people who are naturally morning people have been shown to also display traits that are considered proactive, and late risers display fewer of these traits because they don't get enough sleep on days when they have to go to work or school. Okay. So you'll notice that the way that these sound are very different than this, right? Because this is the essence of paraphrase. It is putting it into our own words while still maintaining what the goal of this information was. Remember, we have to highlight the results of the study, okay? What it suggests, what it shows. So you want to look at those verbs there. To be able to do that, okay? So with the paraphrase, like I said, you are incorporating it into your own writing. So you want to take a couple of things into consideration, right? What's the tone that you're already using? How can you paraphrase to match that tone while also still maintaining the important information, or I should say communicating the important information?